Welcome back, mes amis. We're going to be talking about Expedition 33 Act 2 and a little bit of the start of Act 3. So if you haven't played it, go play it. And if you've already crossed that point, join me for a review. Welcome back, classy crew. So Act 2 has been done now on my end for about a week. And I've been simmering on the ending and the revelations because my first impression was disappointment. And I just had to reflect. The game has gone from a game I love to a game I enjoy, which is a very big difference compared to where I was at the end of Act 1, which I needed to share my thoughts on it right where I was because it just shocked me so much. Act 2 and the start of Act 3 flips a lot of things, answers a lot of questions. I kind of just went, oh, that's it. But now that I've stewed on it for a week, I appreciate it more. And I'm like, okay, that's quite beautiful. So I'm going to dissect that story. And then the gameplay has gotten more frustrating for me as someone who struggles a little bit more with parrying. I don't even bother dodging because what's the point of dodging when you should be parrying to really maximize your figures? Like, I'm not going to try to dodge just for like eventually parry. Maybe the first time I meet an enemy, I'll dodge. But parrying is really where it's at. And what I find the game does as it gets progressively harder, it's these enemies have ridiculous combos. Like one of them has a combo that's 9 moves. And if you miss the first 2 moves, your dude's dead. And then you're just like, well, I guess I'll wait. And it's just like, it's just like slashing your corpse. And I'm like, this is frustrating. I don't enjoy watching this. And then there's more bosses that introduce phase 2, which I'm like, oh, come on. So to me, a phase 2 is done right when you're like, semi-struggling against phase 1. Like it's not too hard, but it's not too easy. And you're like, oh, I was expecting more. And that's like phase 2. Oh, there it is. But when phase 1 feels hard and then phase 2 is even harder, you're just like, oh, please give up. And then finally, I feel the way Act 2 finished in terms of what's the level? The Monolith stage. I went into that like, all right, let's fight the Paintress. Let's finish this. And it just went on and on. I was like, why is this game not ending? And that segment was just too long, too drawn out. I think there was like 7 sections to that area, which was just too long. And then to do that in Act 2, to have like a nice meaty Act 1, a nice meaty Act 2, and then for Act 3 to pretty much start with go fight the final boss, I'm like, there's some balance issues here. So let's talk about the plot first, because I mean, that was my primary driving force behind this. Why are these expeditions happening? Why is the Paintress doing what she's doing? So here's what I've pieced together after, experiencing it. And I've gone back and watched a few cutscenes over again to try to understand it. So the plot of this world is where basically the whole world turns out we're in a canvas. And that to me was like, oh man, like this world was so interesting. And you're going to tell me it's just a make-believe world. But I've kind of accepted that. And it really reminds me of a lot of stories that were shared in the 80s in movies, like The Never-Ending Story, where like they go to this imaginary world in a book. And I'm like, okay, I can kind of buy it. That's kind of fun. We're going into this canvas. And the canvas was painted by Verso, not Virgo, like I kept saying in the last journal. So Verso painted this canvas, and it's his world and his ideas and his creativity that is captured here. And there was an unfortunate tragedy where there was a fire and Mael and Verso were in there, and Verso did something to sacrifice his life, saving Mael in the process, but giving her severe burns and disfiguration, and she can't even speak anymore. I guess in the real world, there's the painters and the writers, and I'm not sure if there's a conflict there, but they have magical powers basically. And the mother, unable to let go of her son in death, goes back to the painting and lives in his world where she can see him and create things. And in that world, she is the Paintress. And we learn that she's actually the one that's giving life to everything. And then the father, who is Renoir, out of a love for his family, tries to save his wife by going into the painting and removing her from the painting. And that is the conflict that we are in these expeditions. And so he's supporting the group as the faceless one, the curator, so that we can defeat the Paintress, so that the mother can be expelled from the painting, therefore saving her. And that's kind of what goes on in Act 2. And then in Act 3, we're like, oh, Daddy, you're not so bad. And he's like, now it's time to wipe out everything. And we're like, wait, why? It's the last piece of verso. And he's like, accept his death, go back to the real world. And Maëlle, having had, a great life in the painting where she has her face, her voice, her friends, actually has a life unlike what she seems to have in the real world, wants to stay there with her brother. And the father wants none of it. And now he becomes the primary antagonist in Act 3. And now it's about fighting him off so that he doesn't destroy everything. And that's where we're at. So, the tragedy of that fire and how the family reacts, that's the beautiful part. And where I was disappointed was like, oh, it's not explained within the world that Act 1 and Act 2 was. So the twist didn't hit me the same way Act 1 did. But on reflecting on it, I'm like, that is a tragic and beautiful story that I can appreciate. Now, maybe Act 3 is going to throw something else at me, but it seems like most things are pretty much explained. And so like one thing I had to look up was, well, why was the paintress still killing off people every year? And what I've kind of learned through some Reddit threads was basically it was a way for her to stave off the Renoir's attacks. Basically, if it wasn't for her, everybody would have gommaged and got destroyed right away. But she was holding him off and getting weaker and weaker and basically showing a warning that you still have like a year to live. You still have 2 years to live. And I'm like, okay, so the paintress was the good guy the whole time, in a sense. But tragically, because she's mourning and not able to let go, which is sad. So it's like, you can appreciate what all the characters are doing. And I always feel that's what makes a good villain, is when you can relate to the villain and understand why the villain's doing what he's doing. And in this case, the father, the villain, Renoir, he's just trying to protect his family and saying like, get out of this fantasy world. We have to go back to the real world and just accept it. So that's where I am with the plot. When it comes to the gameplay, I'm going to dissect this as I progress. So after Act 1, you're left feeling a lot of things and you go into the Forgotten Battlefield. And in here, they add a whole new mechanic, which is gradient counters and attacks. And I remember when it was introduced, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I've already got to deal with either parrying, dodging, or jumping. And at the time I was like, now you're adding a whole other mechanic, which I just can't really wrap my head around. Well, I can wrap my head around, but I'm like, that's one more thing to think about and to worry about. And to this day, those gradient counters throw me off in the timing, because sometimes you can like hit the gradient counter 3 times before like it impacts. Sometimes there's a fake out in the gradient counter. So it's just a whole other level to mess with you. And then for the gradient attacks, I honestly have not, I optimized my build, I would say, to really take advantage of this. I barely use gradient attacks. I'll use it maybe once or twice on a boss battle, but outside of that, and I never get it to level 3. Now I understand I could probably optimize my Pictos so that I'm getting more gradient energy or whatever so I can unleash them all. After all, it is a free hit. But to this point, I just have not taken that chance. And then the first boss of Act 2, the Duelist, is probably one of the toughest encounters at this point in the game. And this is the boss that actually has a 9-hit combo. And the first time I fought him, it was so absolutely disgusting. Like, I just got overpowered. I was like, F this. This is just so stupid in terms of like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then I eventually picked up, you could tell that the attack was coming based on the sound. And I was like, oh, I just got to time it to the sound. And I was like, haha, I'm fighting the Duelist. I'm doing okay. And then I kill it and it's like phase 2. And I was like, oh, you son of, like, this just absolutely, I rage quit at this point. And then I came back, calmed myself, optimized my build, went in, and I wiped him out. So it's one of those things very much like Dark Souls where I fight a boss, I get destroyed, and then I go back with a calmer mind. And I was like, oh, that's how I was supposed to do it. Because a lot of the times I just feel absolutely like, how am I going to overcome this? This is so bullshit. This is so dumb. Sometimes you just got to step back, think about it, optimize, go back into it. So after that, we get to a really sentimental scene with Gustave's burial. The music here just really like making me feel all the feels. The characters getting closure, and this was where I was like, no, I think he's staying dead. I don't think they're bringing him back. And of course, I was sharing how I was confused in the last journal about like Gustave's relationship to Maëlle. And here it's very much just said like, you were like a brother and a father to me. Like you were both. Someone in my last video said my interpretation of Gustave and being confused was because he's French. I mean, I'm a French Canadian, so I kind of understand where you're coming from there. And so at this point, I'm just like, okay, I want revenge. I want to fight Renoir. Let's go. Next section is Monaco Station, which is great because I love trains. And so this is like a train station. Did not expect to have a new character join my party. So this caught me completely by surprise. Of course, I'm talking about Monaco, who is a boss fight, and then it's like, hey, let's join your party. I was like, what? And then I get a little little achievement of like, you have gone every playable character. I was like, oh, I was really not expecting this. So Monoko, it reminded me a lot of Kimari from Final Fantasy X or X, in the sense that you have to keep them with you to basically get all the abilities from the monsters. I've never liked that mechanic, so I don't use Monoko. And one thing I don't like is I will probably want to 100% this game, which means I need to collect all the feet, which is another strange mechanic. I love Monoko as a character. His personality is brilliant. His mechanic, I will just learn to appreciate it because, you know, I'm the type of person that likes to stay in my comfort zone. But once I get out of it, that's when I really get to like discover and learn new things that I might appreciate, like Monster Hunter. So Monoko's great. His obsession with feet is just even more comical. And after this, we go to Old Lumiere, where we get an amazing scene with Monoko, who's like, oh, I can use my power. And then like he destroys the wall and splits the party. And then he's crying and is like, oh no, I just wanted to show off, but I messed up. Again, just brilliant. And the character, the little character interactions you get with Verso, and that you're leveling up with your friendship with all of them, which I later learn is how you get your gradient attacks. Just great. Side note, just love the chemistry between all the characters. Verso and Monoko, like that like banter. Again, I could watch a whole sitcom on that. Verso and Ciel got freaky, and I was not expecting it to go there. So, I mean, you have a choice at one point to basically sleep with Ciel. And of course I took it because, I mean, Verso's been alone for a while. He needs to experience that. It's very heartwarming, the relationship between Lume and Verso as well. And I really like Lume's curious nature, like how obsessive she gets. And I think I shared this a bit in the last journal, but I just really love how they built her personality and how it stays true to that. Like, I don't really know if it develops into a love interest with Verso, but like the way he prods and teases her and the way that she just stays in character where she's like just trying to figure out the world. Just love that. And then, you know, Verso and Maëlle is interesting too, especially now knowing that they're essentially brothers and sister. Or I feel that he's presented as trying to step in as what Gustave was, but falls short, and they basically have to develop that. So all these relationships are fantastic. And then Esquier is just always a pleasant character to have. And eventually he gets his own Expedition 33 headband, which is cool. And I also learned Esquier is a freaking bag of wine, which is, how cool is that? That just made him so much better. But the way that they introduced that in the game was so disgusting. I'm like, oh, that's cool, but that's so gross how he just pukes all the wine everywhere. And they're like, yay, drink up. Ooh. So Old Lumiere introduced these enemies, which I'm now seeing everywhere in Act 3, which are annoying, which are like the knights that either have like the fire attack or the ice attack or some other attacks. So these knights, or like the knights that are split in two, which get introduced later, like I'm just tired of seeing them. I know how to dodge their attack, but I'm just like, okay, here we go. And then when they get enraged, they get 2 turns and they're like, dodge, 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 dodge. And that's the mechanic I feel gets a little worn thin where I am now in the game. But here in Old Lumiere is where we get our rematch with Renoir. And this one, I was so like red. I'm like, let's go, let's beat him up. And it felt pretty good to like, it didn't feel overwhelming. I remember I just had a good time fighting him, and it felt good when I beat him. But then he, of course, knocks out our little Noko, which made me feel a little sad. Not as sad as Act 1, but I'm like, oh, damn it. Like, screw this guy. He took out our little Noko. And then I love the story direction that it's like, okay, the next major barrier is, you know, the Paintress, but we can't get through it until we take on these Axons. And then the Curator becomes useful at this point, and you don't know who he is. It's like, I can build a weapon to like go through. He doesn't say like that, but you know. And we get introduced to the Axons, which, like, gameplay plot wise, I love all this concept of like, oh, there's these even bigger beasts and you got to kill them to get their powers to like progress. All good. So I went to, there's 2, right? You can go to Visage or you can go to Siren. And I went to Visage, which was the one that was said is weakened by previous expedition. And I was, at this point, I was so invested in the story. I'm just like, I'm trying to rush. I'm like, I want more story. I want more reveals. Tell me more. And so I went in and I met the Mask Keeper, who's like, I mean you no harm, go up the path, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, I'll go up the path. And I usually always explore, but at this point, I just wanted more. I just went up the path anyways. And that takes you straight to the boss fight. So I fought the Visage, the masks. I was like, damn, that was hard. And then it's like phase 2, Mask Keeper shows up, and I just get obliterated because, of course, I didn't weaken him. Again, I rage quit at this point again because I'm like, this is so dumb. How do they expect me to do anything? And then, of course, I chilled and I was like, you know, I should probably go explore. I have a sense that there are mechanics, like he was so overtuned there, like getting healed for as much damage as I was dealing. I'm like, there's got to be some ways to weaken him. And so I went off the beaten path. I explored that island, and that's where I learned that, yeah, there are masks. You can destroy them. And talking with my chat in Discord, they're also like, were you shooting the masks in the mirror? I'm like, I didn't even think to shoot the masks in the mirror. I wasn't even really thinking of shooting anything at this point. So I went back in the boss fight, shooting the masks in the mirror, dodging all the visage, faced the mask keeper with none of his masks. So now I was just dodging his attacks, and he went down. I was like, that was night and day difference in terms of difficulty. I challenge you, if you want to challenge, just try doing it with the mask. I think it's almost impossible. And then went straight to Siren, and Siren turned out to be, or Sirene, turned out to be a lot. I found it interesting that the theme of the enemies on this island, and then I didn't even take a chance. I'm like, this time I'm going to explore, and I'm glad I did. I explored. You come across this like really friendly, what are they called? The enemies, whatever. He's called the Tisseur, and they're like, you could fight him and weaken. I'm like, I've learned my lesson. Let's beat this guy. So I beat him, and I learned that what this guy does in the final boss fight is adds shields to the character. But more importantly, if you do beat him, he gives you the anti-charm picto, which is basically it protects your party against the Siren's charm, which is very important. Now, unfortunately, I was like, okay, I'm just going to use anti-charm. I'm going to level up this picto so that I can put on my whole party. But I didn't fight enough enemies, and I didn't have it on enough people, so I only had it on Verso. And it turns out the Siren only tried charming Verso, just my luck. So I was okay to fight her, where the charm didn't take effect. And I struggled a lot less with this fight than with the other ones. So that one went a lot better. After that's done, we go to the Monolith, and I already shared here how the Monolith just weared me down because, again, like the plot was like the momentum was there, like we broke through the barrier. It's like, let's go. You see this, you see the paintress, and then she's like, oh, so you're at the top of the tower, and then like it's just one area after the other. I don't know how long it is. It's like maybe 2-3 hours, but I'm just like, I'm just tired. I don't even want to explore. I want to fight. I want to know more of the plot. So this part here, I was like, they could have really shaved down some content here, especially knowing what they do in Act 3, which I think is they're a lot lighter on the obligatory content. And I just feel like that's a huge imbalance where the prologue, Act 1, Act 2, like has a certain tempo to it. And Act 3, there's just no tempo. Anyways, so when you get to the top of the Monolith, I really want to share my experience with Renoir. And this fight is intense, primarily because of the freaking soundtrack that kicks up in here. It's just like goosebumps everywhere. And I've gone back and I understand French. I speak French, but I couldn't pick up the lyrics properly in the fight. I could pick up some like keywords of like when they're yelling like je t'aime, I love you, and all these things. But I'm like, what is the story here? Like, I feel this is a song about the family, but I couldn't pick it up. So I read the lyrics, and yeah, it's exactly that. It's all about like, it captures the story of the family struggling to accept the death and having the love of each other and everything. It's a beautiful, like, I really recommend it, and it's translated to English. You can find it. So Renoir, I'm totally expecting a bullshit fight. So I really appreciate this. You get him to 50% health, and then he goes phase 2. I'm like, I'm okay with this. I'm okay. Because he did it at 50%. I was like, the music is suggesting this is going to be hard. And he was hard. And then he like summons this monster, and that thing was destroying me. But I'm like, that's okay. It's because he's hard and I don't know what to do, and I got to learn. I had more patience for this way that it was approached. What I didn't have patience for was his freaking rage mechanic. So in phase 2, he gets rage, and I guess my party was not really built with agility in mind. And so he was just spamming 2, 3, 4 attacks sometimes. And I'm like, okay, like, can I play the game, or do I just have to stay here and like rhythm bop to all these parries? That was what was frustrating me. I even looked up, can I get rid of rage on bosses? And it turns out you can't. So I just had to take it. Beat him, went to Paintress. At this point, I'm like, I feel like I might be under-leveled because I'm trying to rush to get more story. The first phase was okay. Then she goes to phase 2, and I'm like, oh my God, more phase 2. Like, me and phase 2, we just don't get along. And I kept losing Maëlle and Lune all the time. And I'm like, screw it. I'm not going to revive them because Verso was surviving quite a bit. He's got a build based around defense and vitality. So he was tanking everything. And I'm using the duelist sword, which lets me attack twice. And I'm using a Picto, which extends my combo. So he basically gets 4 hits before the enemy can attack. And then I'm like loading up by shooting. So I get like maybe 3 to 6 shots a turn and 4 hits. So he can tank and he can deal out a lot of damage. I basically 1v1 the Paintress with Verso. And so, yeah, I 1v1 Verso, 1v1'd his mother. And then, okay, so at this point, we get the beautiful ending, the happy ending. And it's like, yay, we go back to Lumia. The Paintress is defeated. Let's celebrate. All the warm, fuzzy feelings. And then, you've got Verso reading his note from, I think it was his older sister or Alicia. And saying like, congrats, like, that by taking out Mother, you're taking out the last defense of like death in here. And then you just get the wave of gommage and you learn that it's actually Renoir who was doing the gommage, not the Paintress. And that scene was just heart-wrenching. I'm like, everything I've done is pointless. What is going on? I was just so confused, so frustrated. And then for that to go straight to epilogue, and I was like, wait, isn't there an Act 3? What's going on? And then we're thrown into Alicia's world and we learn the backstory of how she got into the painting. And I'm like, I was just so confused. And then we get into Act 3. I'm like, okay, here's Act 3. And I was completely shocked that Act 3 starts it with like, go fight Renoir and say, like, banish him from the painting. I'm like, what? There's nothing else to do? And there's another thing I found interesting. So at the beginning of Act 3, she learns, or Maya learns that she can basically have the power of her mother, which is to create and bring back life. So she does that to pull her friends back. And then you run away and you learn that she can actually like bring back some of the expeditioners to fight Renoir, which I thought was cool. And I thought when they were setting that up, I was like, oh, do we get to revisit all the levels like where you were seeing the corpses and you can actually like bring everyone back to life, which means Gustav's coming back. Like this was my hope. And then for that to just go to a cutscene where they're showing them do it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is a cool cutscene. But I'm like, I feel there was a missed opportunity here for gameplay to let the player build up his army how they want. And based on how much effort they did in reviving the army, it impacts the level of challenge at the end. And I wouldn't be surprised if the developers did intend that, but for whatever reason, they chose to just cut it because they had to get the game out. Because it just felt so natural, because as you're going through Act 1 and 2, you're seeing the expeditioners, and the game kind of encourages you to revisit. So I'm like, Act 3 would have been the perfect time for optional, like, seeking out the expeditioners and bringing them back to life. And I'm also surprised Gustav didn't come back. I was like, come on, what? Like, they set it up. And I think this too is another choice that I think the developers had the option to bring him back because of his skill tree was there. And they just said, no, let's stick with it narratively. It works. And so I'm like, okay. So I have gone back and faced Renoir just to see what it was like. And I have to say, it's absolutely awesome the way they set up the final stage and the expeditioners fighting things and clearing the path for you. I completely failed against Renoir, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna like try to finish the story yet. Let me go explore the world. Oh, another thing I feel was weird is when you're fighting the Paintress and you got to get out of there. Verso summons Eskia and he's like, hey, I got your sorry rock. And I was like, why would he not have given that earlier? Why go through all this effort of finding his rock to swim and all that when he had it? Verso had it the whole time. And I don't understand how they explain why didn't he give Eskia the power to fly right from the get-go. Anyways, now I'm at the point where I'm pretty much exploring the world, and I can't say I'm enjoying this part as much. I love the discovery. I love exploring. I'm discovering all these stupid beaches and these dumb levels to get the swimsuits. And I learned that there's like 9 swimsuits to collect, and I think I've got 5. I basically have a swimsuit unlocked for each character. The best being Minoko and his Speedo. I'm quite proud of that one. The other ones I find are not the best looking swimsuits. So I love the ability to fly and explore, but the problem is I'm fighting mobs that are just destroying me. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like I should be here. And I know that there are some areas that say danger, like, don't go here. You're not leveled up enough. And so I'm not going there. I'm going to these other places that are just really, really hard fights. And I'm like, am I supposed to be here? Is this what I should be grinding? And so I'm just like going places and just feeling defeated. And I'm like, maybe my builds suck. I just recently tried to like rebuild Lume to have more of a defensive vitality build because she was just dying to everything. But yeah, I'm just like not dealing enough damage. And I do have the Picto that unlocks my 9999 damage on all of them. So like I'm not capped on my damage. I'm just, these fights, like the enemies get so many turns, they get to hit twice, sometimes they enrage and then they get hit a bunch of times. It's just not fun. And I hate saying that about Expedition 33, but basically I'm going to try to explore and grind out a bunch of stuff everywhere before I finish the story, or at least until I feel I've seen enough. And so yeah, I'm enjoying exploring, but I am not enjoying just getting my face handed back to me because I walked into the wrong area. So that's where I am. I don't know how much more there will be to share when I finish Act 3. I feel I know most of the game at this point, but there could be another journal if there's a huge plot twist at the end of Act 3. Who knows? I really don't know. There's one last thing I forgot about a note. I did rescue enough of the little lost gestrels that I now have the power to break like blue rocks. So that's another motivation I have to kind of go back and explore levels where I saw them, but I couldn't get through. So yeah, I'm just going to take my time. Honestly, the next journal is probably going to take a while because I'm just not as motivated to play the game. Like I'm not pulled in as much, which is a shame because the game was so like masterfully crafted, and for it to lose me here just feels disappointing. So yeah, I have mixed feelings after Act 2, and I'd love to see where you're at. I know some of you love it. Some people on my Discord have been talking about like how they love where Act 3 goes. But for me, it just kind of lost me at this point, which is unfortunate because it started off so strong. So I'll see you in the next, maybe final journal. And until next time, keep it classy.